big day today. Big day today. I'm expecting a phone call shortly from a young man who is driving a pickup truck over here with a big old trailer attached to it to deliver my shiny new tractor. So, if that phone call happens to come in while we're live, I'm just going to answer it on air, and I think that'll be deeply entertaining. Now, today, we're going to be talking about NFA stuff related to provisions in the Big Beautiful Bill and the use of a provision in Trump's Big Beautiful Bill Act, which has some problems, but y'all, let's be real. What the Big Beautiful Bill is going to be a law, and there is one thing that is always true about the law. There are problems, right? So every law is bad. Now stay with me here. I know. You're going to say, but Lowry, what about murder? We can all agree that we should outlaw murder. We could probably generally agree on that. But here's the thing: what is murder? Who decides what is murder? Right? So, and I use murder because it's the extreme case. And it's kind of, murder in a lot of ways is it's like unicorns, push-ups, and pornography. It's one of those things where you know it if you see it. In fact, the vast majority, I would go so far as to say all law, has that element to it. You know it when you see it. Right? So, taking the murder example, if I walk up to a random guy on a street, pull out a pistol, and blast him in the face, hey, that was probably not great. Kind of like Homeboy back in the Summer of Love, ran up on a man wearing a MAGA hat, shouted, "I found a Trumper," and blasted him in the dome, leaving him DRT. Okay, not great. Not great. Should that be illegal? Yeah, we could probably all agree that should be illegal. What if the man in the MAGA hat had drawn his own weapon in that moment, right? Old boy runs up on him, pistol in hand, screams, "I found a Trumper," aims his weapon, and the Trumper, as he was called in the attack, draws his weapon and shouts, "Do not kowtow!" There you go, Patrick. "Do not kowtow!" You mentioned the shirt, Patrick. I'm going to talk about it a little bit in a minute here. But he draws his weapon and he manages to fire the first shot. Right? He goes straight Han Solo and fires first. Yes, Han shot first. This is important. Han shot first. This is important. Because now what you've got is two characters on the opposite sides of the same situation. And what one of them has done is not a crime. But how do you determine that? Right? If the law simply says, "Thou shalt not kill," which it doesn't, y'all need to go back and reread your 10 Commandments, right? It's always printed as "thou shalt not kill." What the law was is "thou shalt not murder." In fact, God was pretty clear on the subject of men killing other men, right? In Genesis, he who shed the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for in his image made he man. While God might have put a prohibition on the act of murder, he also issued an obligation to use force and execution as an administration of justice, as a mechanism of enforcing the law, right? Now, that said, you get in a liberal state with a biased jury, and you can sure enough be tried for murder in what would otherwise be a clear-cut case of self-defense. And the law generally attempts to correct for these errors, but it does a bad job of it. It does a bad job of it in every case, right? Oh, there are personal stories that I wish some of my buddies could come on and share, but it would be tragically inconvenient to their professions for some of those stories to come out, because when you are wrongfully charged for a crime, anybody that's running a background check, once they see that there's a thing on your record, they may not necessarily care whether or not the thing should be on your record. Right? Like I had a buddy, I won't say names, but I had a buddy I used to play airsoft with who was a convicted felon. And he was convicted, his felony, he was convicted for assaulting a police officer. What had happened was he had a roommate and was moving out of the apartment that he shared with the roommate and went back to the apartment to collect his property, which included a television. Now, this was late 90s, early 2000s, when televisions were boxy, heavy things, not these lovely little flat screens that I've got mounted all over the walls in this studio. You know, it's basically an oversized cinder block, a heavy fucking thing. And so the roommate called the police and told them that he was stealing the television. It was his television. And so when the police arrived, he was walking out the door with the television in his hands. The police grabbed him to pull his arms behind his back instead of letting him set down the television. And he dropped the TV, which landed on one of the officer's feet. And so they charged him with assaulting an officer. Aggravated assault. Now, in all fairness, my buddy could be full of shit. I wasn't there. I didn't see it happen. But there's a reason police like to say you can beat the rap, but you can't beat the ride. And lawyers like to say the process is the punishment. So when we say the process is the punishment, now we're back to the big, beautiful bill. Like I said, it's a law. That means inherently it is bad. Because even with the examples I just laid out, where we're talking about the question of murder versus self-defense, you know, when is it and is it not? Forget lawful for a minute. Consider reasonable to use deadly force, violence, within the realm of just human interaction. Because for my taste, if I'm out in public and somebody slaps my wife on the ass, I think it's absolutely reasonable to feed him some teeth. Right? I don't mean a total, drop down and ground and pound. I don't have to beat a man to death, but I can certainly refer him to a dentist. Aggressively. And I think in a situation like that, hey, you assaulted my wife. I will happily help you shit some teeth. But the law may not necessarily agree with me on this one. My wife says that she would feed him his teeth. Babe, I don't know if you remember this. Since you're watching, I don't know if you remember this. We had, God, I was about to say we had barely, but honestly, I don't think we had even started dating at this point. We were at, I believe it was a birthday party for our friend Jen. We had dinner at the Fisherman's Grotto on the wharf in Monterey, and you and I left together. I think I was walking you to your car. I think this was before we rode everywhere together in my truck, and some dude's cat called at you. This was actually one of those moments where I was pretty sure that we were going somewhere. Some random dude on like Cannery Row cat called at you, but they drove by in a car, so there wasn't much I could do about it. But I was fuming about it, and we had a conversation about it. And you said something about how it wasn't a big deal, and I said, no, it's not a big deal to cat call at a good-looking woman. That's there's even a note of respect to it when it's done right. But you're clearly walking with a man, so that's a different matter altogether. This guy just chose to disrespect me and to use you as the vehicle to do that. And we had an interesting conversation about that dynamic, and I think that was about the point that I decided I needed to take you out for a drink. God damn, that was a long time ago. Whew. The point is, I love you, baby. So the big beautiful bill includes some provisions, and here's where some things are getting right. Includes provisions to remove short barrel rifles, and it's the Hearing Protection Act is the one for suppressors. So we've talked about this on the show many times before. They're suppressors, they're not silencers. It doesn't make the gun go psh, like you see in the movies where the assassin slips in with his little Walter PPK and screws a tiny little can on the end of it and goes tsk, tsk, right. You're not going to assassinate somebody who's laying in bed with their lover without waking the woman up. That's just not going to happen. That's not how suppressors work. But anyway, the big beautiful bill includes provisions to remove those items from the NFA, the National Firearms Act, and the removal is based in part on the argument that the NFA is a tax. So I want to share this with you because this is just excellent work that's been done, and absolutely want to give credit to Braden Langley, what is it, Langley Outdoor Academy. Definitely go check out his channel. I'll pull up links and add them to the description later. But what they've done is they've taken these 3 clips right here in the middle. They've taken the transcripts from the 1934 Ways and Means Committee hearings on the creation of the NFA, the National Firearms Act, so that you can hear. And they've taken the transcripts and done the AI video thing so that us schlubs in the future don't have to trouble ourselves with reading. But to be clear, these are from the National Firearms Act. So
this is the congressman. Now, a very brief statement on this subject. Lawyer though I am, I have never quite understood how the laws of these various states have been reconciled with our provision in our Constitution denying the privilege to the legislature to take away the right to carry arms. Concealed weapon laws, of course, are familiar in the various states. There is a legal theory upon which we prohibit the carrying of weapons, the smaller weapons. The Attorney General replies, of course, we deal purely with concealable weapons. Machine guns, however, are not of that.
Okay, I want to address that real quick before he gets into the question of machine guns, which is a big deal with the NFA. And note, in this, he's talking about the NFA relative to machine guns. The addition of short barrel rifles and sound suppressors to the NFA comes many years later. But this is in the initial construction of the NFA. So that we can all understand that the NFA in total is fruit of the poisonous tree. It's garbage on its original theory from the very beginning. It is the maneuver of corrupt government to deny you rights, to take your rights away from you in clear violation of the Constitution of the United States of America for the explicit purpose of suppressing your access to your free practice of your individual God-given rights. And to do it by using an illegitimate reach around to create a tax, to create a license, right? So understand, the NFA, like all licenses without exception, is the government coming to you with a gun, threatening your life and liberty, taking away from you your God-given, constitutionally protected liberties, and then offering to sell it back to you at a price. Now, keep in mind, the tax stamp, the NFA tax stamp, has always been $200. It has not increased over time with inflation, which is even further evidence that it was always about creating an artificial and, by the way, unlawful bar to entry. And it was never about the revenue itself. It was always about taking your rights away. Always. Now, he mentions, before we get into the machine guns, he says, of course, we regulate concealed carry, small concealable weapons, and we regulate that. I'm sorry. We do what the fuck now? Of course, we regulate small concealable weapons. I'm sorry. I thought the founders were pretty clear on this. Mario and I were talking about this last night after the special we did on Juneteenth, which, by the way, you guys got to go check out our special on slavery and the history lesson on how we got to a world where there are more slaves in America, there are more slaves on Earth today than at any point in history. Just check that one out from last night. But I'm sorry, of course we regulate small concealable weapons. The founders chose to use the word infringe. The right to keep and bear arms, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. Do you understand what infringes the rifle in the middle of that rack? The rack does. The rifles around it do. The 240 Bravo and the 249 and the multiple grenade launcher, those infringe even the law. That right there, this is a little joke that I've never explained on air. That right there is a law, a light anti-tank weapon, a law which infringes these firearms because it is adjacent to them. It is near them. That is what infringe means. My shirt is infringed with a collar. It is adjacent or attached to. Right? Adjacent or attached to. In any way related. In any way co-located. That's why they use the word infringe. They didn't say the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be denied. As in, the government shall not directly stop a person from owning a firearm. No. They said, if the subject is that of firearms, of access to arms, of the right to keep and bear those arms, to carry them in any capacity whatsoever, the government shall kindly fuck right off. Cannot even have an opinion on the matter. They cannot even go so far as to say your gun has to be a certain kind of safe. No, no. Like Mr. Kalishnikov said when he testified before the Congress on the efficacy of the AK-47, making the argument that the U.S. Army should purchase a big crate of AK-47s and start using those instead of the M14 for the doughboys to fight. He was asked, "There's no safety on this weapon. It has a selector switch that goes from semi to fully automatic. Where's the safety mechanism?" Mr. Kalishnikov said, "He's gone. He's not safe." That's correct. The point of a gun is not to be safe. So instead, these assholes say, well, obviously, you can't have concealed weapons. No, I'm sorry. Obviously, you can. Obviously, you absolutely can. Do not kowtow. Not an option. But he goes on. Now he's going to talk about, is essentially what you're about to hear is the confession of Attorney General Cummings that the entire point to the NFA is to violate the Second Amendment indirectly enough as to make the argument so that they can get away with it. This is akin to the arguments related to the Commerce Clause, which says that it is the responsibility of the federal government to make regular trade between states, not to regulate. And there is an important distinction here. The Commerce Clause does not say that the government shall regulate, as in craft regulations related to the conduct of commerce between states. It says that the government shall intercede to keep regular trade between states. And they were very clear in the letters, the founders, when they discussed this and ratified this into law. It is that the federal government will essentially hold the authority to intervene in trade disputes between states to prevent individual states from placing onerous restrictions on other states from conducting commerce. The chief concern was that individual states might use something akin to tariffs or levies to prevent two states on either side of them from doing trade with one another, right? So you got, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. If Georgia wants to sell cotton to Mississippi and Alabama says you're going to have to pay a tariff to do that, and suddenly the Georgia guy has to go up through Tennessee and around, then, well, that makes it difficult for, the Georgia farmer to sell over there, and Alabama gets to corner and steal that market. And the federal government is expected to prevent that from happening. Well, the fucking lawyers have taken that language and abused the absolute mess out of it to create the legal theory that the federal government somehow has the authority to regulate the production and use of pharmaceuticals. I'm not even talking about selling meth and coke across from New York to Maine or something, right? I'm talking about just pharmaceuticals. The idea that the federal government has any authority to regulate or control what substances you can manufacture, possess, consume, or use in any capacity is foreign to constitutionality. There is no provision in the Constitution, right? And I hate having to go down this road often because, quite simply, there is no room in the Constitution for the war on drugs to exist, for the federal government to outlaw the use of any narcotics. I don't care if you're talking pot, cocaine, heroin, etc. There is no authority in the Constitution for the federal government to have any involvement in those activities. Now, that is true. That is a correct legal argument. That please believe, do not take that to mean that I am a supporter of legalizing all drugs. I am and I'm not because of the law. But the fact is that it was only possible for the Supreme Court to find that the federal government had this authority by very intentionally abusing and perverting the language in the Constitution to get to that point. So AG Cummings says, obviously, we restrict the carry of concealed firearms. So just so you know, just from the outset, this smarmy piece of shit is an absolute abuser of constitutional law. That he became the AG at some point and was able to serve as the AG in connection with the passage of the NFA is a black mark on the history of the United States government and the entire political apparatus. It is an obvious detente of deep political corruption, stretching back to as far as you can stretch back American history. Let's be real. The American government, and especially the Democrat Party, which is the oldest political party on planet Earth, by the way, no other political party has existed continuously since its inception for as long as the Democrat Party, which from its beginning has sought to do no more or less than pervert the Constitution at every possible opportunity. He goes on, after saying that one otherwise seemingly innocuous sentence that absolutely shows him out to be an agent against the interest of the federal government and, more importantly, of the people by whose consent they govern. He goes on to explain how he intends to abuse the language and the law to get around the Constitution. Here we go.
That class. Do you have any doubt as to the power of the government to deal with machine guns as they are transported in interstate commerce? Well, I hope that.
See, there it is, interstate commerce. Right? What was I just saying about the Commerce Clause? To make regular, you cannot stop states. You cannot prevent states. The federal government does not have the authority to prevent states from doing commerce with one another. It has the authority to prevent states from preventing one another from doing commerce with other states. But that's a very, very different thing.
The courts will find no doubt on the subject like this, Attorney General, but I was curious to know how we escape that provision in the Constitution. The Attorney General responds,
I was curious to know, how do we escape that provision of the Constitution? How do we escape the Constitution? Mr. Attorney General, I understand that the thing we want to do is illegal as fuck. How do we get away with it? How do we get away with breaking the law? Mr. Attorney General, I need your counsel here. I need your advice on how it is that we can go out of our way to break this law that we find inconvenient. That law being the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution.
Oh, we do not attempt to escape it. We are dealing with another power, namely the power of taxation and of regulation under the Interstate Commerce Clause. You see, if we made a statute absolutely forbidding any human being from having a machine gun, you might say there's some constitutional question involved. But
might say there's some constitutional question. Shall not be infringed. Do not kowtow. I'm sorry about the crab kowtow jokes, guys. That is a very inside joke that I hope many of you will get in the future. But that's a long walk. That's a long path to walk, and that you can take that to be a preview of tomorrow night's special.
When you say we will tax the machine gun, and when you say that the absence of license showing payment of the tax has been made indicates that a crime has been perpetrated, you are easily within the law. So, in other words, it does not amount to prohibition, but it's more of a regulation. That is the idea, the Attorney General responds. We have studied that very carefully.
And like Dad points out in the comments there, FDR was president at the time and he was a socialist. Y'all, you should go back and watch last Saturday's special on how the commies got into America, on the origin of communism and socialism in the United States. Hollywood was always red, and so was the Democrat Party. Right. It is a tragedy that the Democrats use the color blue for all their marketing and the Republicans use the color red for all their marketing. In some ways, that's just a tip of the old red hat to the uniparty. But the Democrats have always been red. So what they essentially have done with the NFA is instead of restricting your access to the firearms, you have to have a license. So you can, in fact, legally own a machine gun in the United States of America. Now, it has been illegal to manufacture machine guns outside of direct military application for decades now, but you can, in fact, own a machine gun, and like the 240 Bravo, or the 249 back there. Now, those are airsoft guns. Those are movie set props. Because I'm not going to leave my real guns unsecured in the studio. There's a reason for that. Now, those are not props. Those are ammo cans. But the damn, I just lost my train of thought from making a joke. Oh, so rather than actually restrict the weapon, you can indeed own a machine gun as an American citizen, not military or police or law enforcement related. But in order to do so, you need an FFL and you need a tax stamp. So you go buy yourself a $10,000 240 Bravo and you got to pay an extra $200 tax. I know that's above and beyond the sales tax. Now, when you're spending that kind of money on a weapon, $200 is little more than an inconvenience against the cost of the weapon. Fair play there. But why? Where in the Constitution do you derive the authority to take from me my constitutional right, my constitutionally guaranteed right, and then sell it back to me? I'll take this a step further. I would argue that as the law is written, in every case of enforcement of a legal requirement for licensure, because in every case of licensure, a right has been taken from you without express authority to do so from the Constitution by an agent of the government acting under color of law, and then sold back to you at your expense, that in every case that the law requires you to have a license to act, to be a member of the bar, to have a medical license, a license to drive, a license to keep and bear arms, a license to hold a public rally, to protest on a traditional public forum. Anytime that the government charges you money to exercise a God-given right, which is protected by the Constitution. And let me be clear, everything that you can do that does not cause explicit harm to another person is a God-given right protected in the Constitution explicitly by the 10th Amendment and within the legal theory of the nebulous penumbra of unenumerated rights. Every single time that a license law is enforced by an agent of the government, that agent of the government within the letter of the law has violated Section 242, the suppression of civil liberties under color of law. Every single time. Whether it means that you're being arrested or you're being driven away based on the absence or presence of a license to assemble or to carry a weapon, etc. You're being arrested for it, you're being driven away for it, or if you are even being charged to acquire such a license, if you are even required to acquire such a license, then a federal agent has just violated your constitutionally protected rights. As long as it is a thing that you can do and it doesn't cause harm to another person, The Constitution makes it very clear that the government's got no business there. The government has no business interfering in your daily general activities, right? So the NFA sought to and achieved the violation of the Second Amendment by using that absolutely, I mean, let's be clear, perverse. It is a deep and intentional perversion of the Interstate Commerce Clause in order to craft a tax on your God-given free rights. So the big, beautiful bill, Thomas Massey made a great argument about this. He compared it to the poll tax. What the NFA tax on short barrel rifles, silencers, even machine guns or rocket launchers, grenade launchers, etc. What they did by using a tax to restrict the access of the people to the right to keep and bear arms is akin to having a poll tax. Right? We used to have poll taxes. You paid a poll tax to go and vote. And the argument was, no. If you make people pay for the privilege of exercising their rights, which rights are protected by the Constitution, then that is a form of restricting the right. Right? The Congress shall make no law which abridges the right of the people to the practice of free speech, free press, peaceful assembly, and the petition the government for the redress of grievances. I know the freedom of religion is in the First Amendment as well. I don't think it belongs there because it is speech. That's a whole different philosophical argument. But and frankly, that's actually why churches are tax exempt. Because if you tax the church, what you're doing is you're placing an onerous government restriction on the access of the people to the free practice of their faith. Can't do that. Because that is a mechanism by which to restrict the access to the practice of rights from the people. So for the same reason the Supreme Court said that, hey, you Democrats, you can't charge these poor Negroes for trying to vote. You gotta let them in. You gotta let them vote. You can't say, hey Negro, how much can you afford to pay to vote? Well, I guess I could afford to pay $1 in taxes. Well, it's $5 then. No, you can't do that because that stops that man from the free practice of his constitutionally protected, God-given right to speak. Because that's what a vote is. Your vote is speech. It's the petition of the government for redress of grievances. It is the right to assemble peacefully. It is the right to speak. Can't shut that down with a tax. But they still think they can use a tax to disarm you, to make you soft and weak and imperiled. All right, guys, I am going to go ahead and put a pin in it right there. Not going to get to any DGUs this morning because I really wanted to talk about that topic. Definitely go check out Langley Outdoors on YouTube, Twitter, etc. I believe on X it is. Let me pull it up here. One of these. Yes. Okay. So you go on X. You can find homeboy at Braden LOA. Yeah, Braden LOA. That's Braden Langley. His Twitter handle is Braden LOA. And you can go there and follow him. And if you go there, if you go find him, Braden LOA, you can pop over here to where it says media, and that will bring up the clips here. And you scroll down just a little bit, and there it is. There's 3 clips from that hearing. And again, what they did there is they took the transcript from the 1934 Ways and Means Committee hearing on the NFA tax and just converted. They used AI to generate the voices and the little video snippet there to discuss, to make it to make the information more accessible. But clearly, what happened is the government decided that they don't care what the law is. They want to make the law serve them rather than serve the people. And like I said at the beginning of the show, the law is always bad. The law is always bad because it is necessarily rigid. And don't get me wrong, I'm not making a total anarchist argument here. I'm saying that you should always be skeptical of every law as it's written, because there are no laws, like with the case that I laid out to begin with, in the case of law prohibiting murder, there are no laws which are immune to corruption. They're all vulnerable to the corruption and abuse of evil men, like Attorney General Cummings, who, he's dead now, obviously, but you will find constantly, Jerry Nadler, for example, has recently been arguing against the provisions of the Big Beautiful Bill to remove the short barrel rifles and suppressors from the NFA. And go watch some of those hearings. Nadler has no idea. He knows nothing about firearms, about how they work, about what they do. He just knows that he doesn't like guns, and he doesn't want you to have them. So, but like I said, my tractor's about to be here, so I need to go ahead and put a pin in this one. Guys, thanks for watching this morning. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow night at 2100 for the Rumble exclusive premium special. That's for the paid members only. If you're watching on YouTube, Twitch, X, Locals, Facebook, anywhere other than Rumble, here's your pro tip. Here's your last chance so that you know I'm only going to be live everywhere for about 10 minutes tomorrow night before we dig into the exclusive special. So you got to log in to Rumble, right? Sign up for a free account if you're not already a paid member of Rumble Premium. Get your free account on Rumble. Come over and watch the show. If you're watching in the first 10 minutes, I'll be giving away random free premium membership. It'll be 1 month of free premium membership. And if you haven't already purchased a Rumble Premium membership, then you can show up and maybe get your freebie at random tomorrow night and get to watch the special. Tomorrow night we'll be talking about the evolution of artificial intelligence. Again, the last time we covered this, we were talking about individual direct character representative artificial intelligence and the existential line between the philosophy of identity and where the difference lies between sentience, sapience, and organic intelligence. Tomorrow we'll be talking about the dangers of a global artificial general intelligence developing into a single larger overmind. Think Skynet, think Golden Eye or Eagle Eye. Think Skynet, think Eagle Eye, think Big Brother. That's going to be what we're covering tomorrow night. So it is Friday. We're going into the weekend. I know my safety brief for this weekend is don't fall off the tractor. Your safety brief for this weekend, y'all get out there, have a good time, get out in the sun. The weather report where we're at in Georgia, it looks like it's going to be sunshine and beautiful all weekend. Go swimming, do some barbecue, but be careful. Enjoy your adult beverage, but don't drive drink. Don't fry bacon naked. Don't do nothing stupid. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, videotape, no two at the same time. Y'all be safe out there. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.